So you have some cash saved up and you're looking to invest it. What do you do and where do you go? So let's talk about the best ways you can invest $10,000 right now. So first off, we need to set some expectations. When thinking about building your net worth, you want to first eliminate any financial drags you have before investing. And then once you begin investing, the primary goal of investing should be to first retain your money. And then the second goal should be to make a return on that money. I mean, you worked hard for that $10,000, especially if it's your first $10,000. So let's treat that cash well. It's precious. Let's treat it well. So there are two major boxes that you need to check to have a solid financial foundation beneath your feet with nothing dragging your head underneath this financial water. And those boxes are debt and emergency savings. So first off, if you have $10,000, before you invest, pay off expensive debt. There are two types of debt, bad debt and good debt, unless you're Dave Ramsey.
When you have debt, you are susceptible to getting your freaking head taken off.
But good debt is the debt that brings you income. It builds you wealth over time. Or it's so cheap, something like a cheap mortgage, that it doesn't make sense to pay it down early if you are investing that excess cash instead. With good debt, you're actually making money with the money that you borrowed. This is super common with real estate investing, and even a business loan could be technically considered good debt as long as your interest rate isn't eating you alive. An example of bad debt is credit card debt. So if you do have credit card debt, the best possible investment you can make right now is paying off that debt, because you're not going to be able to reliably get 25% interest or 25% return anywhere else. And another example of bad debt is a car loan that's anything more than like 5 or 6% interest. So after your debts are paid, you need to then build up some cash in a savings account for a rainy day fund. It happens and you need to be ready for it. If there's a major economic downturn and your portfolio drops 50%, like many stocks did in the pandemic, or your business starts losing money, or you get laid off and you don't have a cash reserve, you're going to be stuck in a horrible position that you don't want to be in. Life is a lot better if you have a couple months' expenses tucked away. I mean, I'll never forget the first winter after purchasing a business at 19 years old. I went all in on this business. Winters are slow in the moving industry, and there was a point in time where I was looking at how much I had to pay in payroll. I was looking at my bank account and I was like, I don't have enough. I simply don't have enough. I never want to have that feeling again. So now that you have all your bases covered, let's jump into 5 ways you can invest your first $10,000. The first one is invest in yourself. One of the most valuable and overlooked areas is investing time and money into yourself and realizing the value that your awesome brain can bring to the table. And you might be thinking, yeah, invest in yourself. I've heard this before. I'm trying to buy stuff and get rich off of buying stuff. But hear me out here. And you might not want to hear this, but the odds of you passively investing $10,000 into anything and getting rich from that investment are extremely low. So put it this way, the S&P 500 index in the long run basically beats every individual investment. That index returns on average about 8% a year. If you invested $10,000 at 8% a year for 40 entire years, you would have $242,000 at the end. Even that is not enough to retire off of $10,000. So this is a problem. $10,000 isn't likely going to make you rich passively invested, but you can focus on increasing your earning potential. Learning is as cheap as you want to make it. You can do it for free at the library, or you can pay for courses, or you can pay for college. And guess what? Society doesn't care how much you paid for your education. Society only cares about the value that you bring. There's a few ways that you can leverage learning and make more money. First, you can become better at whatever you already do. Are you a personal trainer who charges $40 an hour? Well, become the top 1% expert in your field and now charge $200 an hour. This works for literally everything. If you're truly an expert in whatever you do, there is massive value there and you can charge much more than the average person in your industry. The second way you can leverage learning is simply by learning. The more you know, the more opportunities you will have and the more risks you will know to avoid. I like to think of learning things as this kind of little collection where I'm exploring, and when I find something new, it unlocks more of everything else because everything is related. So here's an example. When I was a teenager, I was obsessed with Warren Buffett and getting rich off of stocks. Surprise, surprise, because I still kind of am. And with that, I was obsessed with reading books on stocks and finance. I read something like 28, 29, 30 books on stocks and finance because I was like, this is going to be my life. This is how I'm going to get rich. And it took about 27 books before I realized, oh, you can't get rich this way, or it's very unlikely to get rich this way without having money first. So I needed to focus on making money first. So I transitioned over to starting my own business, and I was able to take all that knowledge that I picked up from reading financial statements and understanding how the finances of big businesses work and place that on my small business. Then I ran a small business and still do for many years. And now when I look at stocks and other investments, I have real world experience that I can place on the numbers on these sheets, and it all relates to each other and has made me better both in business and as an investor. It all relates. The more you know, the more you pick up from other things. And this leads me to number 2, the second way that you can invest $10,000, starting a business. This is kind of the financial extension of investing in yourself. So bring it back to my example. I was reading all those finance books. I had some money saved up. I wanted to make a bunch of money, but I just knew that the math didn't work out. So I purchased a business for very cheap. I had about $17,000 in savings. I basically invested all of that into a business. Within 3 years, that business was worth more than $1 million. There is no investment that I would have come across in the stock market or anywhere else that would have given me that kind of return. Simply by focusing on myself, I knew that those returns could be much higher than 8%, 10%, whatever I would have gotten in the market. And because of that simple fact, I actually hesitated from investing in other things for many years because I knew anything that I made, if I reinvested back in the business, I was going to make 30, 40, 50, 100% returns annually on that money. So I was focused on building up that thing, the active income that I had control over first before trying to worry about passive income. Once I had this base built up and I had more money sitting there than I could actively reinvest quickly in the business, that's when I started investing in other things. And that brings me to number 3, max out your Roth IRA. So now that you have no debt, you have some savings, you invest in yourself and you're constantly learning, and you still have money left, it's time to invest in tax-efficient vehicles. If you go and create and max out a Roth IRA, your 59-and-a-half-year-old self is going to be forever grateful that you did. And if you want to learn even more about Roth IRAs, I'll link a video above that goes very in-depth on the topic, but we'll cover a summary here. So a Roth IRA is a retirement account where you deposit after-tax dollars, money that you've already paid tax on. You deposit that into an account where you can invest in securities like ETFs, stocks, mutual funds, and then once you're 59-and-a-half years old, all of the massive gains that you've accrued from years of compound interest are then tax-free. It's an amazing tool to set yourself up for retirement. And if you haven't started saving for retirement, this could be a great option for you. And the reason I say max out, not just because the namesake, max out a Roth IRA, is because you can actually put $6,000 per year into a Roth IRA, $7,000 if you're over the age of 50. So unless you're Peter Thiel and you find a loophole, there's some limits on this. Now, the 4th way that you can invest your $10,000, your first $10,000, is through an ETF or an index fund. And while the best way to do this is through your Roth IRA account, the next best option is to buy an ETF or an index fund through a brokerage account, a regular brokerage account. You see, one downside to the Roth IRA is if you wanted to pull that money out before the age 59-and-a-half, you'd get hit with a hefty penalty fee that can defeat the entire purpose of the Roth account. So ETFs and index funds are an amazing option for someone who has $10,000, wants to invest it somewhere smart, but doesn't want to do any research because it gives you broad market exposure. So ETFs and index funds are baskets of securities like stocks that give you diversification when you're investing. This way you can YOLO $10,000 into the S&P 500 and trust that in 20 years from now, there's going to be much more than $10,000 in that account. A few of my favorite index funds after just a broad S&P 500 index are first, Round Hill Investments Deep Value ETF. Second, iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF. Third, Distillate US Fundamental Stability and Value ETF. And fourth, the Vanguard FTSE Emerging Markets ETF. Now next, the 5th way you could invest your $10,000 is through an HSA, a health savings account. Similar to a Roth IRA, it's tax protected. Storing your money in a way that protects it from taxes is always a good investment, as long as it's not, tax evasion.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
At some point in our lives, we're all going to have some kind of medical expense that we don't want to pay for, whether it's for ourselves or our children or someone else that we happen to love. A health savings account allows you to save for when that time comes without paying taxes on that money first. So if none of the options on the list sound appealing to you, but you want to do something smart with your money, this might be the best move. And hey, after 20 years, if you still haven't used your HSA money, the government actually allows you to use the money for veneers. So you could go get yourself some porcelain pearly whites with your HSA if all things go well. And then sixth and finally is individual stocks. Now let's say you have no bad debt, you have some savings built up, you invest in yourself regularly, you're investing in tax benefited accounts, and you still have cash left. What can you do? This is when you could begin with some individual stock picks if you're willing to do the research. Again, for most people, an index fund is really all you need, but some people want to do additional research. So what you want to look for is well-priced companies that have stronger financials than their competitors. So you compare things like levels of debt, return on equity, and level of earnings, and consistency of earnings. Listen to earnings calls and determine how the management thinks, and if you align with how the management thinks and what their goals and outlooks are. Search for reasons not to purchase the company. And then if all the stars align, which if you're really doing enough due diligence, it should be pretty rare. If all the stars align at that point, then you could take a dive. A few companies that I've purchased in the last year that fit this criteria are Nucor, Steve Madden Shoes, and Tyson Foods. So that's going to do it. If you enjoyed this, all I ask is to gently press that like button, give me a subscribe if you think I deserve it, and I would just like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.